Welcome. In the next few video, we'll talk about moving your shared components up to the next level. In this one, part one, we're going to explore our possibilities. What are we trying to solve? Well, we're trying to solve most of the hell included in software development. So DLL hell, component management hell, shared component hell, multiple version of component hell, all these things basically cause us a lot of trouble when we're doing software development, and we want to manage all of our versions and where our asset reside and which one are we going to use, and if we want to reuse some component, how do we manage them and all that. So what are the classic options that we see customer use when we actually try to solve this problem? So the most obvious one is to copy the binaries to a share on a network and then reference from there. The next one would be build our components to a known folder, might be a share, might be on our machine somewhere using .bin or something, and then reference that binary from there. That works great in Visual Studio, doesn't work really well on your build server. The next one would be to create a lib folder into our solution folder and add most of our component to that folder, and then in turn add that to version control. This is a better solution since we can basically create our workspace and download those components, and then everybody's got the same components to work with. And then finally, we could create a lib folder, same thing as the previous one, but this time it would be outside of projects, and essentially we branch inside of our various projects that particular folder, and then we reference from inside of our project because now it just appears as another folder. This helps for management because we can decide to take a version of our component at a given time because we just merge it in, as opposed to basically when we check it in, as in the previous version, essentially everybody will have a new version of that component. So what are the problems with those approach? I listed a few just a moment ago, but when the binary changes, every application referencing those binaries will be at risk of not working unless you test them individually. Now, we all know that this takes a lot of time and pretty much is never done on a full scale of every different application that actually uses those components. The other problem really is which version are we actually using? So if we actually put it in a share, we actually have a version of the DLL that we're using. Is it version 1? Is it version 2? It's going to be replaced by somebody sometime, and then basically it'll be version X. Now what some kind will do is they will create a subfolder with a version number, and then they will reference that in there. That in turn creates some other problem because now when you create a new version of that component, you have to actually reference a new folder. That brings us towards our goal, but it's still somewhat manual and problematic. So what could we use instead? Nougat is a technology that started quite a few years ago, and basically it's a package manager for Microsoft development platform, including .NET, and basically it has all sorts of facilities built into Visual Studio to actually point to a gallery, in this case the Nougat gallery, to actually download our shared component. A lot of the new components coming out of Microsoft, including Entity Framework, including the .NET Framework, are now Nougat packages that are available on nougat.org. It is centralized management of our components, and we basically upgrade our components on our term, which is what we want to do. And the best way to do that is with Nougat. You have more info available at nougat.org. So let's see how that works. All right, so we have Visual Studio open in our trusty demo website, and what I'd like to do is I would like to add jQuery to this website. So I'm going to right click, and as we can see in Visual Studio, we have an option that says Manage Nougat Packages. So if I do this, I'm going to have a nice interface that's going to show up. I'm going to go online, and from here I can actually just say I would like to see the jQuery package. So if I hit this, it's going to search and jQuery will come up here. So what do? I have a nice facility here where I can actually install. I can see if there's any updates available. I can see all the installed package to my app, my solution. So I can just click on the install here. This will actually download jQuery from the nougat.org. It'll put a nice little green check mark here saying that it's actually installed, and we can see that jQuery is now part of our solution. Now, that's great, but there's a little downside to this if we don't prep the project in advance. So I'm actually going to go to my Team Explorer here, and if we look at our pending change, we're actually going to see that the scripts are added to our solution, which is fine, and they're added to source control, which is also fine. We have a package.config, which I'll talk to you in a minute, and we can actually see that the packages folder, which is created by the unzipping of our jQuery solution, actually is added to source control. Now, this is one thing we actually don't want to have added to our source control. So how do we actually manage that? So I'm actually going to go back to our solution. I'm going to talk about the package.config for a second. So this file is actually added to our project, and it says every version of basically the NuGet packages that are installed in this actual project. So in this case, I only have jQuery 2.13 that's actually installed to my project. So how do I go about not getting the actual packages added to source control? So what I need to do is I'm actually going to show you how to uninstall a NuGet package. So I'm going to go back to reference here, I'm going to manage my solution, and here I'm going to actually look at my installed packages, and I'm actually going to just uninstall jQuery. So if I do this, we'll see that the script folder stays there. It's actually empty. The packages.config is gone because there's no more packages here. And if we actually go look at our Team Explorer, we'll see that only demo website has actually changed because it added the script folder in here. So how do we actually go about doing that? I'm going to go back to my solution, and what we need to do actually is to go into our solution, and we need to create, in that particular project or this solution, we need to create a directory called .NuGet. And in that directory, if I actually open up my solution here, we now have a .NuGet here. And from here, I can actually just minimize Studio and actually take my NuGet.config, add it in here, and then I'll go back to my solution, and I will import an existing item here, and it'll actually be my NuGet.config. So the NuGet config is basically something to say I want to disable source control integration of the packages that actually get downloaded by NuGet, so then they don't show up in source control. So I'm actually going to save this. One thing you actually have to do for this to work is you actually need to close the solution first, save it, and then reopen it. So I'm actually going to reopen my solution here, because once it's open, Visual Studio now actually reads that NuGet.config and has that switch to true. If you don't do that, then it's still considered off. Now, if I right-click, add my NuGet package again, go online, look for jQuery again, and basically install this, we're going to see we're actually going to have the exact same thing happen. So I now have my script folder, everything's here, but now if I go to Team Explorer and we look, we'll see that we have our script added, we have our package.config, and we have a repository.config, which basically is a file that says which project actually has NuGet packages. So if we look at this, we'll see that, if we open this, we'll see that only demo website currently has a package.config. So after all this, we can actually check in our solution, save this, and we now have a solution that has jQuery actually installed in it. Now, if I go back to my demo website and we look under the cover for a minute, we'll actually see that we now have this packages folder. We now have this repository.config, which we saw, and we have our jQuery here. So what actually happens when you install a package? Well, it downloads a NuGet.pack, which essentially is a zip file which contains all of your asset. So it's a zip file that has a content folder and a tools folder. If we look at the content folder, we'll see our scripts, our 4 script for jQuery here. And if we go back to tools, we'll see some common installs and uninstall scripts. So when we actually want to run when we actually install our script or uninstall our script, we can run these things as part of our packages. And we'll talk about that when we actually do the video on creating packages for NuGet. So we talked about setting up our solution so that it would not insert any packages to version control, which is what we need to do, but we haven't talked about package restore. So package restore is a technology that actually is part of Nougat since 2.7. You don't need to turn it on anymore. So there's actually an option in Visual Studio in your solution to right click, enable package restore. This creates a target file and adds a bunch of things to your projects, which you actually don't need. It's actually just built into Studio and the build server. So we actually don't need to turn this on anymore. And the only thing we need to do again was to add that nougat.config file into our Nougat folder. You notice that I actually used the command line to create the Nougat folder because from Windows Explorer I can actually create a folder starting with a dot. So I had to go on a command line to do that. And here we see the content of that nougat.config. Make sure you're aware that Nougat actually caches stuff on your local machine, so things will actually be cached on your build server as well as your developer machine. So if you have a version that's the same number but it's different, then you may have the cache version and it's not getting the proper values. So how does it actually work? Well, from Visual Studio, we right click on to our project. It brings us our node. We can see the manage NuGet packages from here. This will actually talk to the nougat.org, will give us a list of packages. We can then basically install our components into any branch that we want. So in conclusion, stop using homegrown approach for managing components. There's a nice technology that's available in Visual Studio, especially made for that. Nougat is a great way to improve and manage your common components by offering a centralized approach. Anyone can know which version is being used by looking at the package.config. There's actually no asset and source control, which is what we want, and there's no unintended upgrade of components. But what happens if you want to have your own components? Well, you currently, with the approach we just explained, we actually go to nougat.org. But could we actually go to company.org? Well, let's talk about that in part 2. If you'd like some one-on-one help with creating automated build, release, or deployment, or maybe you just don't have the time to do it yourself, I'd recommend Imaginet's 10-day automated build and release management quick start. If you're interested, just email us at info@imaginet.com.